Okay, we're back on the air. I'm Avram Friedman. This is News from the Roots on Mountain Stream TV. It's about 4:05. And this is a special edition of News from the Roots. This is Wednesday, January 24th, I think. And I have with me Connie Jean Conklin, who has started an organization called Seascat. You can see the banner in the back. And she's somebody in the community who is doing something to help herself and to help others. And Connie, give us an idea of what Seascat is and what you're doing.
Okay. Seascat it's an acronym. It stands for Supportive Environment.
It's best to look in the camera rather than up there. I do that
I got
all the time
lights
too.
in my eyes. And
Yeah,
that's what's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Seascat stands for Supportive Environment for Adult Survivors of Child Abuse and Trauma. And it was inspired in the 1990s, actually, by Andy. I've written a book. It's about the 10 years we were together. He's a dissociative identity disorder with more alters than Trudy Chase. If you're familiar with Trudy Chase, she's known for having the most alters of a dissociative identity. It used to be known as multiple personality disorder.
Ah, okay.
So that's probably what you'll think of. You may have seen the movie Sybil.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Three Faces of Eve was the first one.
Okay.
Okay.
And the United States of
Tara, yes.
Tara.
Yes,
I've
on
seen that as
Showtime,
well.
I think it was, or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, it wasn't a bad depiction at all, really. I watched that on probably Netflix
Netscape,
or
yeah.
something. Yeah. Anyways.
Or not Netscape. What's it called?
Netflix. Yeah.
Netflix. Getting toward the end of the day here. Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's early in my day, so that's
Yeah.
fine. Anyways, I was the one who questioned his diagnosis. My roommate, Ray, we were always looking for a third roommate, let him move in, and there was no getting rid of him once he moved in. Anyways, because I questioned his diagnosis, and he'd been labeled schizophrenic. Well, first he was labeled severely mentally retarded because he was nonverbal till he was 4, and then he was labeled schizophrenic because he'd only talk to the alters, which nobody else could see. So when I met him, he was, in his early 20s and had that diagnosis all his life, and I'm the one that questioned it, and it just opened Pandora's box, and I felt I had to stick around to try and cure him, and lost my whole self in the process because my memories were repressed. And anyways, 10 years later we were apart and ended up back in North Carolina, and I uncovered my own memories anyways, Seascat was his idea. It was something he wanted to do because in those days there was no help out there for anybody who suffered any kind of abuse or trauma. For decades and decades and decades, okay, the primary lobbying force for mental health was NAMI, National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. And they did a really good job with their goal, which was to show that, it was founded by parents and family of schizophrenics and some certain bipolars, and their idea was to prove it was not the parents' fault, because those are brain diseases, and they did a good job of convincing people brain diseases are not the parents' fault, and anything to do with abuse or trauma just kind of disappeared from everybody's minds, and there was no help out there. And one time I got him admitted to the hospital, and I told them what I'd seen and what I believed, and they said, well, we'll see, we'll evaluate him. They called me up the next day, well, we agree with you. He's a dissociative identity disorder. We don't treat them, so he's no longer a client here. You better come get him. And it's like, oh, that was nice, So then we really struggled, with no support system. And actually got, the only help we got was for a domestic violence program.
And what period of time are we talking about?
This is in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it was, he wanted to do this. What we had envisioned was an actual place, a safe place for people to come and therapists to be there, and they could work on their recovery, not try to earn a living. I did this when I worked with borderline personality disorders in Florida. I worked with our housing program, and it worked for them, you know. Mm. But this was way beyond, you know, anything financially that we could even, you know. So it was kind of a dream that was in the back of my mind all the time. Anyhow, back here a few years later, I got my cedar chest that had been somewhere else. Anyways, I got my cedar chest back, and I started going through things in it, and had completely forgotten a big part of my life. Mm. I had forgotten how I'd worked my way through school and worked as a professional, and my mind was back being the victim, because I was the victim of some angry teenage male alters that, you know, wanted to hurt me at one time, and I'd completely forgotten ever being anybody of any significance. I'd worked hard to get, you know, for...
So to be clear, you yourself suffered from multiple...
not a multiple personality disorder, no. But the diagnosis that I accept, and a lot of people are starting to accept it even though it's still not in the DSM, is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's other diagnoses that are in the DSM, but none of them have ever really fit me. And the government has me disabled due to bipolar disorder, but that's not even the true diagnosis. That's simply a symptom. And I'm going to get into ACE scores, and it'll explain some of how that diagnosis comes into fact. With complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The same with dissociation. Dissociation, they've only recently started including it as a symptom of borderline personality disorder, and they've got other places, but none of it really fits well with myself or most of the people I know who are survivors of child abuse. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder seems to fit pretty much exactly. And I do have it in here. The actual, I should skip down to that, because it's, if I can find it in order. It's one of these ones here. It is complex trauma and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I did a workshop on this one time with another nonprofit I was working with. We brought in people suffering from the military style, what you think of as military PTSD, severe events that occur in adulthood, and leave you with flashbacks and things that trigger the symptoms, and compared it to complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it is very fascinating. It is very fascinating, the difference. With military people who've developed their PTSD as adults, what's worse for them is the fact that they're trained to kill, and they can hurt somebody they care about when they're triggered or have a flashback. What's worse for complex PTSD is you've had it all your life, and so you don't even know what normal is. So you don't know what's okay, what's, you know, it's like I say, you just don't know what normal is. You've never learned what normal is. And it's some of the same symptoms plus. I have to keep track of my glasses. All right, negative self-concept, feelings of worthlessness and guilt. Feeling like you're not yourself. You don't know who you are. I mean, and no sense of self. Your personality can change. That is that can be somewhat of the bipolar stuff, and that can also be some of the dissociation, where you're functioning like a, because you're all right, dissociation, simplified explanation of dissociation. Okay. When you drive here from home, okay, if you take the same route every day, you go through traffic lights when they're green, you stop when they're red, you go right past, street signs and buildings on the side of the road that you're familiar with, but when you get to work, you don't remember any of those details because it's you're just kind of flowing with where you're going. You're not really paying attention to the things around you, and those things are kind of, they're not noticed. And so a person who, that's like a simplified, very simplified version. When someone is severely abused at a very, very early age, usually before 3, 5 at the latest, it has to start. When the brain is, and they're still, with Andy, he was months old. His father was a pedophile. And his alters could tell me the stories of what happened to him, but he didn't remember it till they told him, and then he had to get over that re-traumatization. But anyways, that's a severe case of dissociation. What a child does at that age is they leave. A part of them leaves that body.
They just leave their body.
Yeah, and they're somewhere else.
Acknowledge reality, basically.
Right. I mean, they're not there. They're not experiencing it. Some other part of them is, and that part of them, that more times that happens, the more times there's that many different parts of them. Sometimes it might be the same. It becomes an alternate state, and that alter might re-experience the next time. It might but sometimes they just keep splitting.
And so I imagine, like, a person sort of gets used to the process of leaving one's body and not acknowledging the reality around them in other situations throughout life. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting is a lot of people that are DID, I mean, true dissociative disorders with separate alters, distinct separate personalities, a lot of them function a whole lot better than people like me. Because I know one person, okay, she's a local person, so I won't say her name, but she's got a blog that probably a lot of people around here read. She can't get disability. She has tried and tried and tried. But she has got an alter who is very professional. And she gets an interview. She gets in front of people asking her questions about, to determine her disabling condition. And that alter they call it fronting, just takes charge, and there's something wrong with this woman. She's never been able to get disability. And
because she's not in that state at that moment when she's
because she's got an alter fronting. Yeah, and then she goes home, and the children get out, and they get all angry, and they want to draw, they want to color. She can't get dinner cooked or dishes done,
I wonder, I mean, if that could explain some cases of learning disabilities as well.
ACE scores.
Are
going to. I'm going to get to the ACE scores. They're very important. They're new. They're new. They've only been around for about 15 years, which, when you think about how long it takes to actually understand and spread this information out, people are still finding out about it. I had an appointment yesterday at vocational rehab. 13 years, almost 14 years ago, I was told I was too old and overeducated for them to want to help me. I finally got it approved for them to help me. But I think it's the economy. They know we can't live on Social Security anymore. Anyways, my worker didn't know about the ACE scores. Because I asked for some help with medical stuff. And she said, we can't help for that. And you have to follow through on treatment for your condition. She'd accept complex PTSD, that was correct instead of bipolar, just because she accepted that, but she didn't understand that you can work on recovery and come really close. You'll never be perfect. You'll never be who you might have been because your brain goes through changes. But you can pretty well function and be pretty okay mentally if you've really worked hard on your recovery. But according to the ACE scores, the medical conditions that you develop over time, they are what is disabling. And but she didn't know about ACE scores, and according to Voc Rehab, you can get help with your disabling condition. The fact that you've recovered from it, well, if you've recovered, you can't get help. So you can't say you recovered. You can't, And she said, well, you're seeing a therapist, right? I'm going, well, a year ago I saw somebody a couple of times. She goes, no, you have to be seeing somebody. So now I have to go back into therapy just so that I can say I'm still recovering, But anyways, it's physical stuff these days with me, But and those are all explained in the ACE scores now, which is awesome.
So going to ACE scores, what does that exactly mean?
All right. ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And the S stands for scores. So sometimes they say ACEs or just ACE scores.
So there's a scale.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
The best video about ACE scores, the easiest one for a layperson to understand and get some background, is by Nadine Burke. And it's a TED Talk, but it's also on YouTube. And there's also a bunch of really good ones by Vincent Folletti. And I just found a whole site this morning. This morning while I was eating breakfast, I had my little phone on. And there's actually it's on one of these scrap papers that I wrote out later. And I'm going to be following them closely. This is where I got a lot of the medical stuff. The actual name of the Academy on Violence and Abuse, and it's a nonprofit, and it does a lot of research, and it does a lot of community support. I just wrote to somebody about a program they have for resilient communities, trauma resilient communities, and which hopefully I'll have something to talk about with that in the future. Okay. Anyways, all right, more about ACE scores. Let me get back to where the ACE scores is. Let me do a few statistics from this before I get to ACE scores.
Sure.
Okay. Go
ahead.
I told
you do things in the order you want.
Because I'm afraid I'm going to forget some of the important things in the beginning. But anybody who's watching and feels like they already know all this stuff, at the end I want to point out what they can do. Good. Okay? So if you need to pause, fast forward, come back when it's archived or whatever, that will be the last thing I want to talk about is what people in the community can do. Okay? Anyways, in 2008 is when I actually founded Seascat. After memories came back from my cedar chest, and I was hospitalized several times that summer. Because it just totally messed me up to know that there were things I didn't remember. Anyhow, and this is our vision, okay, ideally. Our vision is a world where every child is raised in a loving and nurturing environment, so there is no need to help adult survivors of child abuse. Our beliefs are children should be loved and nurtured by the people who raise them. Children should always feel safe and secure in their environment. And children should grow into adults who feel safe in their world, in control of their life, and able to contribute to society in a meaningful way. And our mission statement is we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating, finding, and or providing a supportive living environment for adult survivors of child abuse for the purpose of allowing them the safety and security they need to focus on recovery. And like I say, what we talked about with Andy was a place, a safe place where therapists, there's more information out there, plus financially, we don't even have a 501c3 yet because of money.
So Seascat is not 501c3 yet?
Not yet.
But you're working
hoping.
on it. Yeah.
We're hoping if we can ever come up with some money. What we're doing is we're educating the community. The idea is that if we educate people on the issues and struggles, so when you see somebody homeless in the street, or you see, you don't just step over them. You realize, there's something going on with them. And if they're asking for help, then just because they're 40, 50, I'm 65, it's still you can struggle all your life, depending upon the type of abuse and the severity of the abuse. So it's to develop empathy in the community for survivors. Actually, this is a good place to insert. When I first moved here, and I got all those memories back, okay, and I didn't sleep. I've had severe insomnia. I treat it now with L-theanine. Amino acids make a big difference. But I didn't then sleep at all. And I'd be out at night walking my dog. Cops would show up. I would go into such a panic. I mean, it would scare the heck out of me, But they were always nice here in Jackson County. Mm-hmm. And
why would they come?
Because I'm walking down the street in the middle of the night, and they don't know why would somebody be walking down the street at 3 a.m, going nowhere, and they just
checking it out.
They're just checking it out, and they'd say, "Are you okay?" And I'm going. At first, it was like, "No, I'm not okay. I'm terrible," and I'd be freaking out, and they just, so we just want to make sure you're okay. We don't mean any harm, and it was real hard for me to believe that. Real hard for me to believe that. I may never have made any progress on my recovery if it wasn't for this was county sheriffs here in Jackson County being that way. I was beaten up by police in another county. They were only supposed to transport me to a hospital. I was fine until they put me in handcuffs. They weren't supposed to. So I just, that's important to know. That is the kind of thing that empathy can make a difference. If the cops, they see somebody walking down the street at 3 a.m, they don't seem to be going anywhere. Yeah, they've got a dog, but that's, why don't you walk your dog in the daylight like everybody else, If they can, the last time a police officer responded to me, I was on foot crossing, it was right down near here. There was a bridge you have to go over where the sidewalk isn't there. You have a space about this wide.
Oh, one just past Harold's down here.
Right down here by Harold's. I was walking to the grocery store. I didn't have transportation. I haven't had for a long time. There. Somebody blared the horn behind me, and I didn't see them coming. And I just started screaming, crouched to the ground, and I was shaking like a leaf for a while. And it took me a few minutes to calm myself down. I'd learned to do that, and to get across on the other side, and cops were waiting for me, and I'm going, all right, I can explain this now. I can explain it to these guys.
Was the car a cop, the one that was...
There were several cops.
Several cops that were honking at you.
No, it wasn't a cop that honked. It was just it could have been just somebody saying hello. It could very well have been, and that probably was somebody I knew, But it totally freaked me out. By the time I got to the other side and it started to calm down a little bit, this one police officer, county sheriff, waved away the other officers, and he was standing there waiting for me. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, but I have PTSD symptoms. And he goes, oh, I know that. I just want to make sure you're okay. Don't you remember? I'm the one. I met you several times in the past.
And he was protecting you.
And it was like, I'm fine now. It just, somebody startled me with their car horn.
That does make a difference. And we do have good police here.
We do.
Good sheriff's department. And this is in general, I think, a very caring community that we
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And So anyways, I had to say that. I just had to say. But anyways, that is the empathy we're trying to develop, the understanding, that, these are people that are working on issues and may work on them their whole lives. Anyways, and a few other statistics like 85% or 80%. When my mission, I already read that. This is it's in there, but you can't see it very good. Anyways, one of my posters that I make, it said, there's so many people out there that think that as soon as you turn 18, you're no longer, you're not dealing with abuse. You're an adult now. They don't understand. They think you should just be over it. And they're not. It barely begun because you got to learn to change your thinking completely to adapt. I mean, you adapt to a crazy household. Now you got to learn how to adapt to a whole different world as an adult. To work with people, keep a job, go to school, function, and peace with your neighbors, little things. I mean, a lot of things you don't think about. Relationships are real hard. And one statistic, when I cite a statistic, it's because it's generally accepted, or I've got the where it came from. Okay, generally accepted statistic by hundreds of sources. Okay, 80% of child abuse occurs in the home by a parent or guardian. Stranger abuse is not a big problem. If a child can go home, I mean, it's a problem, don't get me wrong, it's never happened. But I mean, if a child can go home to a nurturing, loving environment, even if they can't talk to their parent, they can recover without any detrimental effects, especially if it's a one-time thing.
Just having that safe haven to go
Exactly.
to. Yeah.
It makes all the difference. In North Carolina, a statistic I got was 75% of abuse is to children under the age of 5.
Wow.
Neglect is the most common form of abuse. It's defined as the failure to prevent adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision appropriate for the age of the child to protect the child from hazards. Parents who leave their, 5-year-old home alone, just lock the doors and windows. I mean, Law and Order SVU, there's always an episode about something like that,
And
that's
the extreme chain to bed or something like that.
That's neglect. But that's, when you chain it goes beyond neglect. That's physical.
Right.
But while poverty is not neglect, child abuse occurs in all segments of society. Rich, poor, every culture, it's pretty evenly distributed, except it is more common when there's poverty to have neglect. It's the most common form. These days you're going to be finding more of it, I'm afraid. It's more people are having a hard time keeping a roof over their heads and being home for their kids. Both parents working, some families, both parents working 2 jobs.
So economic stress, is a peripheral cause of...
It's a big factor when it comes to neglect.
It's not peripheral cause, actually. Yeah. It's a main cause.
Yeah, for neglect. It's equally common between boys and girls, more prevalent with the younger population. Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse and incest can be defined as unwanted sexual experience before the age of 18, including verbal, or physical contact by someone under 18, by someone 5 years older. They had to put that age difference in. There are a lot of people stuck on a pedophile list, which, I mean, it's a great thing to have, but at the same time there are people stuck on it because they were
19 when the person... They were 18 when they were 17.
And they're stuck on that list forever. They can't go to the public park. They can't go to a concert on the creek, and that's pretty sad. But there's, it's
severe, but in some cases it's warranted.
Exactly. It's one of those things that's not easy to define, not black and white. but that's why they put an age difference in there.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, is that new, that age difference thing?
I think it's relatively new. I don't think
Yeah.
in the beginning there was ever an age difference, and that's how so many people got stuck on pedophile lists. Physical injury that was not accidental. I see this every so often, posts on Facebook about, corporal punishment. And I always have to bring into discussion of physical abuse. Because it starts to trigger something in me when I see people say it's okay. But it is if the child knows what they're being punished for and knows their parent loves them. I mean, you're going to slap a toddler's hand away from an open flame.
So if it's just arbitrary, that's not
But if
good.
it's
But if it's directly, if there's a cause and effect that is apparent. In other words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I mean, of course, there's accidental too,
Right.
but and you have to be aware the abuser could deny it's on purpose, but it needs to be purposeful. Punishment that is inappropriate for that child's age, size, or condition, like medical condition. Normal discipline does not leave marks.
Right.
I still picture my younger sister with welts down the back of her legs and them bleeding. And I still see that in my mind when I talk about physical abuse. And hitting with a closed fist, kicking, burning, throwing a child, whether they've been injured by being thrown or not. Another good friend of mine is developmentally disabled and autistic. And that's what people focus on. But he was also thrown down the stairs by a stepfather because he couldn't walk yet, and he was in a wheelchair. And his stepfather just threw him down the stairs instead of dealing with him. And he struggled. I mean, he's actually got more understanding of all of his conditions, though, as a result of working through trauma and abuse issues with his mother. His mother was an awesome person. She rescued him and the family basically from abusers, and it ran in the family, and she was an awesome survivor.
And I guess I have to wonder, how this is connected to the fact that sometimes people get married and have children at such a young age, and they're just immature themselves, and they don't understand the consequences of their actions.
Well, it's interesting. This is one of the things I'm going to get to. Culture makes all the difference. I worked as an elder companion for several years with a lady who had dementia, and I learned about her family, and there's a school desk in dystonia. I've got dystonia. Words right there. Catalucci. There's the schoolroom in the. I always get lost trying to find the place, but there's a schoolroom and the school desk, and it's got her name and the guy she married. Wilma and I knew his name because it's the name of the street that they're on. Anyways, they were married when she was like 14, 15, because that was the culture. They had an awesome family. They were married for like 60 years or some unbelievable number. They raised 8 kids, every one of them upstanding and contributing members of
Well, that's the exception rather than the norm.
But it was the culture to marry at that age. It was understood and accepted that this is your role, and they were awesome people, awesome family. So it depends upon what's normal in your culture as to the effect it can have, things like that. Anyways, the most damaging form of abuse is the one I'm going to talk about now, and this is the one that you're really going to see the ACE scores go up on, and that is emotional abuse, which is not that easy to define because a lot of people don't know that's not normal, and I've got several definitions of it. It's when a parent or a guardian or anybody that's an integral part of your life, okay, that you're supposed to be able to trust and respect and expect that they're going to care for you. All right. When they belittle, they ridicule, they call names, they're unreasonably critical towards the youngster, and that kind of abuse over an extended period of time. I've got some more. Emotional abuse, commonly includes repeated verbal abuse of a child in the form of shouting, threats, degrading, humiliating criticism, and then there's also things like confinement, not letting them out of the house, not letting them go places, shutting them in a dark closet. Well, they may have enough room to breathe, you hand them food, but that's they're not getting beaten, but that's emotional abuse.
Yeah.
Social isolation, not letting them have friends, not letting them be around other people that they can learn to relate to. And it's the most pervasive, and it's the one that could do the most damage.
Now, does that also include abuse of children toward each other?
Bullying, yeah.
Bullying, and sometimes an older sibling to a younger sibling.
I had a cousin who used to tease me for being
devastating,
fat. Yeah. And I because I always kindergarten. There were 15 kids in the class picture. I took up half of it. I was also bigger for my age, so it wasn't just fat, but I was bigger. Anyways, that caused me to when I was 14 to starve myself for a whole summer. I ate nothing but grapefruit for about longer than the summer. I mean, 6-8 months, easy.
Just grapefruit.
It's a miracle I didn't die, and I had severe allergic reaction to any kind of citrus for another 2 decades after that, which was terrible. I loved being grapefruit, but anyways. So that wasn't as devastating because if I had been able to go home and not. My mother was who causes the abuse. This is where it gets is actually not the next thing on here, but it's soon. All right, the things that make a difference as to how the effect of the abuse. Cultural expectations. Okay. Believe it or not, incest is culturally acceptable in some places, and it isn't half as devastating. I don't think it's ever healthy, but it's not as devastating as it is where it's not normal. It's not normal, I don't think, really, anywhere, but anyways. It's a cultural thing.
It is a cultural thing,
yeah.
But, right.
Yeah. A big difference is, was that child able to talk about it? Did they have a guidance counselor in school that knew this kid was having trouble in class and took him in to talk to him? I mean, that can make all the difference in the world. Did they have a minister that understood the issues? I mean, I have a course I developed for a continuing ed course, which I still haven't taught yet, but I presented it to SCC and they liked it. It's designed for helping professionals, to help them be better at helping. And I've got the course outline here for anybody who wants to ever see it. Anyways, if I'm ever steady in one place where I'm not worried about housing and transportation, I'm going to present it. If the child's able, let's see, the age of the child makes all the difference in the world. And if it was a chronic event or a single event. The age, you know why the age matters is because the brain is still developing. They used to say the brain was developed at 3 to 5. Now they're saying it's early 20s before the brain is completely developed. And the brains are not going to go through any changes as a result of the abuse. And that's I'm going to talk more about that in the A scores. Who committed the abuse, like I say, whether it's a stranger or a trusted adult. And the response of the person the child tells. I can't tell you how many people who they told their mother what their stepfather or father or whatever or older brother did to them, and mother doesn't believe them, believes the abuser. That's worse than the abuse itself. That the person that you think you can trust totally shoots you down and says, I don't believe you. You're lying. And that's extremely common. Extremely common. Doubting, blaming, ignoring, or shaming can be worse than the actual physical abuse, sexual abuse. That can actually be worse.
But so what becomes a question? I mean, do children sometimes lie, about other people abusing them?
They do. It's not so extremely common.
How do you know?
You have to do a lot of investigating.
Yeah.
That's why it's important with that we have the Department of Social Services, where they can go in and take a child out of the home and evaluate the home. It's sad taking a kid away from a parent, because sometimes a kid is torn between, they get used to being around. It's a familiar place, even if they're abusing them. They don't necessarily want to be taken away from that parent. But you've got to be able to investigate and have the kid in a safe place at the same time. And but more often than not, if they start talking about abuse, it's
real.
Something happening.
Yeah.
Something real. And it's better safe than sorry. Let's see. Yeah, this is old information. They're giving diagnoses that I don't believe in. But anyways, they're still in the United States is way behind the rest of the world. The ICD, which is the Bible of diagnosis according to the rest of the world, almost every country out there, includes complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
ICC, you say?
ICD.
And what does that stand for?
International of Diagnosis. International something of diagnosis.
Okay.
Clinical.
Convention or something like that?
Oh, shoot. It's somewhere in this papers.
Okay.
But anyways, when I first read that diagnosis, I'm going, oh my God, that's exactly me. Because I've had every diagnosis thrown at me, including the one that's just the title of my new biography. My name of my biography is The True Story of a Malingerer.
Of a?
Malingerer.
Malingerer.
Yeah, that's when you're there just looking for attention.
I see.
Which is, I've had that diagnosis. And it kept me from getting help a whole lot sooner, too, because there was a therapist I wanted to see on that inpatient unit, and I didn't stay because of the psychiatrist. And, which is sad. That therapist cured, she made a world of difference to a friend of mine. Well, her abuse was a little older, so she wasn't, she had been raped and gotten pregnant and had a child by her rapist. And her parents were raising that child, but she was real torn. Anyhow, she had a breakdown as a result of that and was diagnosed schizophrenic, put on antipsychotics. And do you know a little known side effect of antipsychotics is psychosis? So then they kept giving her more. Then she developed Crohn's disease and was going to die. And so she found this therapist.
Is the Crohn's connected to the drug?
A scores.
Really?
Well, it may be also from it is also from antipsychotic medications too.
It's also a genetic thing, right? Isn't it? Disease.
A lot of things that are genetic, they're finding more and more. They're
They're triggered by...
They're triggered by other things.
other
They may never manifest if you have a really nice life.
Okay.
You know.
So there's a genetic component to
Yeah.
it, but it's also...
it is also a side effect of antipsychotic medication, too, now that I think about it. I've just been focusing so much on ACE scores. I was really... Anyways, he uncovered the rape and got her to talk about it. And last time I saw her, she'd gotten over the Crohn's disease. I mean, she was huge, bigger than me. And she had, she was married to somebody she met on inpatient. He was on the, what am I trying to say? But anyways, just know me again. She met somebody on inpatient. They ended up getting married, having kids, and happy life. Real active in the church and her community, and it was simply because somebody took the time to talk with her about events in her life. And it wasn't really child abuse; it was a rape. And she was older. She was like in her 20s when I met her. So and the kid was like 3 or 4 that she had. So, late teens. It wasn't an ongoing thing. It wasn't young. Anyways, here's another interesting statistic. I had a therapist who didn't really believe this, but there's statistics in several places confirming this. This is according to I will cite this one because she didn't believe it. According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 2/3 of adults entering treatment for drug and alcohol report being victims of child abuse and neglect. That also is something I recently uncovered under ACE scores. 2 is a statistic for that. It's in my notes I recently took, but it's Vincent Folletti, who talks about ACE scores on YouTube videos. He came up with this number that a person with an ACE score of, I believe he went with 6 or above. With a person with an ACE score of 6 or above.
That's on a scale of 10.
On a scale of 10, they're 5,000 times more likely to attempt suicide, more likely to have an eating disorder, more likely to have a drug abuse problem. 5,000 times. So it's there's a lot of anonymous groups. That's another thing. It really doesn't come up till things later that you can do for treatment. But anyways, I wrote it on here, added it on here. My first 12-step program was OA. I didn't feel it was the core issue though. And when I discovered Codependence Anonymous, I started going there. And I held Codependence Anonymous meetings for a couple of years there. And codependence is a condition that's often caused by child abuse. Almost always. Dysfunctional family of some kind. Anyways, and then I found out, and this is awesome, ACOA, which stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics, they don't use those words anymore. They say ACOA, Adult Children of Dysfunctional Families. I used to envy people who had 12-step programs because I didn't think there were any out there for me. Because my parents never drank or did drugs. But ACOA is an awesome group. Anyways, here it is. When a child feels that the events in their life are unpredictable and they have no control over what's going on around them, that's when they develop complex post-traumatic stress disorder, if it's over time and from early age. An unstable home where there's domestic violence, a parent who's mentally ill. I worked with one person whose father was schizophrenic. And just the chaos involved in his breakdowns. caused a lot of dysfunction. She was blessed to have a mother who really worked to try and keep the family together, so that helped her. But it's not unusual. Symptoms. Here's the symptoms. Anxiety, flashbacks, nightmares, emotional numbness. I had a lot of this for years. Irritability, and when I worked in the mental health field, I didn't remember any of the abuse. That part of my life had been blocked. I was looking for answers when I went to school, and I got my master's in guidance and counseling because, well, my parents didn't support higher education. My father never finished high school, and he did just fine. My mother got a high school diploma, and she said they've all agreed that was a good idea, you know. But if I wanted to go to college, they didn't want anything to do with it. That was up to me. And I worked really hard. The only money I got for college was from the Kiwanis Club my first semester.
Where did you graduate?
In Lake Worth, Florida. I went to Palm Beach Junior College when $100 from the Kiwanis Club paid for everything for one term.
Well, that was a different era.
That was a different era.
Yeah.
And but I couldn't keep doing it. It took, eventually, I mean, I had to get away from my parents. I got married to get away from my parents. Obviously, that's not a good reason to get married. We stuck it out for 10 years because we were friends,
Wow.
you know, and we just kind of lived our own lives as roommates, you know, and I the longest job I ever kept was substitute teaching. It wasn't full-time, it was just part-time. But I could do that while working my way through school. Mondays and Fridays were guaranteed. Tuesday, Thursdays were classes. And then Wednesday I could clean house, study, you know, and if maybe get called, you know, because subbing you get, you know, there's certain times when the school years are different and you could work full-time for a little while. But yeah, it's, and I taught special ed, learning disabled and emotionally disturbed. I figured studying about emotionally disturbed would, you know, because I knew things weren't right. Took the first, but it wasn't until I was working on my master's program. I was more distractible than my kids. So I got out of teaching. Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. It was a commuter school then. I don't think it is now, but it was only the last 2 years.
You got your master's.
Yeah, yeah. It's only
Commendable.
it only had graduate level courses, and it was a commuter school at that time. No sports, you know. So it was different than attending a regular college. Anyways, I got married. Was married for years, and then I went back to school and worked my way through college and I learned I was more distractible than my kids when I taught learning disabled and emotionally disturbed kids. It was like, I worked in a private school for a while. It was awesome. And he put me with 4 or 5 kids and the full-time aide. I still was more distractible than the kids. But he's a good reference. Anyways, that was in Lake Worth, Florida. So I had my master's, so I went into, when I got my master's, and it took me the full 7 years you're allowed to take to finish a 2-year program to get my master's, and I went to work in the mental health field. And there's a lot of walking wounded in the mental health field and in social work, looking for answers. But, you know, intuitively, I'm distracted by this is all right for me. I'm talking about I'm kind of normal for a survivor of child abuse. A lot of, when I say survivor, I mean people who have lived through it to the ripe old age of 65. Okay, a lot of people never get beyond doing anything with their lives. They're the ones who step over when they're over the grate in the sidewalk where the heat comes up. You know, and they're in the shelters, and they're in the homeless programs, but they never stay. I don't think of them as survivors in the same way as a survivor who's
They're just living on the edge all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Right when I started, there was nothing, because like I said, there was NAMI. My office mate and I studied. She worked with dissociative disorders, or she tried to. None of the psychiatrists would accept the diagnosis when she worked, but she'd worked with them many ways and did the research herself. And I had all the borderline personality disorders because intuitively I knew what they needed, and I worked out a really good system there. But the job I had was supposed to get me licensed as a therapist. It was simply red tape is the only reason I didn't get licensed. I was an MED and my supervisors were all MSWs, and the whole time I was getting supervision I was being told that after 5 years I'd be licensed. And it only paid like minimum wage because you were supposed to get licensed. And so when I found out they weren't accepting my supervision, I had to move on. My mother bought me a house and expected payments, and I couldn't make them. Anyways, so I moved to the deserts of New Mexico thinking I was going to find greener pastures.
Did you?
No. That's where eventually I got disability. And
a lot of sand in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it out there, though.
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it.
What
I just
part of
couldn't
New Mexico?
the Highland Desert area in the north. Las Vegas, New Mexico is the location of the only state hospital, or it was at that time. There may be more by now. I'm betting there's one in Las Cruces by now, because it's kind of far away. But it was really the primary industry there. They had a small university, and they had
Las Vegas, New Mexico.
The real Las Vegas, which is Las Vegas, New Mexico. It was there first.
Okay.
It's on the Santa Fe Trail. Okay. I went there, and that was my last job. I was a site counselor 3 for the state, and that's the only reason I get as much as I do for my disability, because that's the only year I made good money. Anyways, what was I getting at? See, I told you I get distracted.
Sorry. Yeah.
How did I end up talking about New Mexico?
Well, we were talking about your career.
Yeah, at 45th Street, mental health in West Palm Beach. I intuitively knew what the borderline personality disorders needed, and I structured their lives to give them somebody they could count on to be predictable in their life. And I worked with our screening department. If somebody came in a crisis, they held them till 5 o'clock, and I went over there, and they knew my clients, and they knew they had to stay there and weren't even going to talk to anybody until I got there at 5 o'clock. And I would get there with a piece of paper and it all written out. I will not hurt myself until, and I will keep the following appointment, and I'd move their appointment up till like the next day, and then I'd send them home. And it worked. They didn't get on inpatient that way. And then I worked with our housing program, because it was multi-level. There were so many complaints I had about the system in those days, and these days there's nothing like this. And we were so much more advanced in those days, and I didn't know it. Our housing program was basically meant for the schizophrenics, right? Their first time away from home, and they're learning to take showers and how to, boil water and, take their meds, very basic stuff. And my clients were all people who had jobs. They'd have apartments for a while. They often had a car. Sometimes they'd live out of that car, and but they were too functional to go into that program. I mean, they wouldn't have accepted it. And you'd have to stay there for 3 months before you could even think of moving on. So I worked with our housing program and got them into the top level of our housing program, which was independent apartments, paid for, by 45th Street Mental Health. It was the program. And then they didn't have to get a job right away, didn't have to pay rent, and they'd come and see me twice a week, and we'd work on cognitive skills until they had dealt with a lot of this. Eventually, as long as they had as long as they were on any kind of medication, they got their case management through us and their therapy through us. If they went off medication, if they didn't need it anymore, there was another agency. But I could only bring people so far because our whole program didn't go very far. But it stopped the revolving door on inpatient, and it taught them that there are people that you can talk to about this and begin to work on your problems. You know. Anyways, I couldn't live on that after 5 years not getting licensed. I gave up my house and moved out west. That's how I got there.
Okay. Right.
Anyways, and when we were talking about setting up Seascat in the beginning, I was picturing what I had done with a big old facility to do it in, and that's just wasn't practical. Now you can get on Facebook, and there's at least 100 groups out there. Mostly, there are people like myself who have been working on their issues. They've become, and YouTube. There's so many life coaches out there. And there are people like me who've worked through their issues, and then they went back to school. They didn't go to school first. They're usually younger. Because there's more out there now. There were so many years there was nothing that I got really a late start on my real recovery. I started on my recovery when I got divorced in 1982, but progress was limited, because there wasn't resources. So in Seascat, I mean, obviously you're looking for funding. Have you tried any crowd rising? I've got I got a GoFundMe to try and get transportation for us, and it never happened.
What about Patreon? Do you know about Patreon?
I've heard of it.
Well, that's a little bit different than the other crowd raising, or whatever it's called, fundraising methods, because it pays you a salary for a certain period of time to accomplish your task of getting something started, basically. I know about this because my son has applied to Patreon for doing something on permaculture.
I have to write that down.
And so you might look that up at Patreon on the internet.
EON. Okay.
Yeah, and it's not a simple thing, just like signing your name to a crowd rise thing. You have to fill out an application. It's a more involved process.
Well, I applied for a pollinator grant.
Okay.
When I was working for another nonprofit, when I was employed by the state of Franklin for low-income seniors and working in another nonprofit. And then I had to quit what I was doing because I had to take care of my mother who'd had a stroke, and but that was a tough time. But anyways, I had to give up my working with that nonprofit, and I had to explain to the pollinator, the person that was controlling it, that I was not going to be dispensing this money. I was getting the money for an organization. There's a committee. Okay. Well, they ended up not doing what I saw would work, and the money got spent with nothing to show for it, and yet I was the one who wrote that. So when I tried to apply for Seascat, they're wanting more. They're wanting proof that this is all going to happen. So they said keep applying, but I didn't get it, and I applied for an Evergreen grant recently, and they liked what I wrote, except that they will not accept anybody using a fiscal agent, and we don't have our own 501c3. We were using Entrepreneur Skill Networks, 501c3.
It's not complicated to get a 501c3.
It's not complicated, it's money.
Well, it's not. You mean paying an attorney to do it? Or what?
Well, Al Bouchard helped us with our founding, the paperwork for that, and told me what to do. And he's the one that started all the other nonprofits. I do know 2 people who've offered to help us. Moss Bliss, who did it for the Homeless Coalition in Asheville, he's offered to help, but he's in Tennessee now, and he's doing a lot of other things. And then there was someone else who offered to help some too. But we have no money. We have none.
It's a chicken egg thing. It's hard to get money if you don't have the 501c3.
Exactly.
But if you get the application for it, you can fill it out yourself. You don't really need an attorney to help
And you do need money, though.
Not a lot. It's
500 is the last I know.
500 is
sure
the
it's gone
application
up.
fee?
Yeah. That's what,
That's a federal form, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought that's kind of when we started the Canary Coalition, it cost $400, but that was almost entirely for the attorney fee. The application itself was, I think, it was free, or maybe $50 or something like that.
Oh, Canary Coalition or Mountain Stream TV?
No, Mountain Stream TV is part of the Canary Coalition.
That's what I thought.
It comes under the
Canary Coalition was quite a while ago.
Yeah, 2000.
Yeah. The last person I know who got theirs was real recent, and they paid $500 alone. Not the attorney. They didn't even have an attorney. They had Al Bouchard, and he's died since then.
But he was charging the fee?
No, he didn't charge. He charged.
So it's you have to pay $500?
I think they paid him like $60 or something.
So you had to pay $500 to the
IRS.
IRS, basically. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that was already 4 or 5 years ago at least, yeah. So I'm assuming it's gone up since then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe.
ESN was $300. Dogwood was $500.
Okay. Never mind, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Over just a matter of 5 years later,
Yeah.
So we have a non-profit thrift store, and actually maybe I should get on ahead to that. I have no idea what time it is.
Don't worry about the time. We'll take as much time as we need.
We have a non-profit thrift store, sort of. Okay. We opened almost 2 years ago at Gateway Market in Whittier. It's just
That's
before
on 441 on the way to Cherokee, between Silva and Cherokee.
Exactly. Just before the Cherokee exit. I mean, you're right there, right across from the Starlight
And if you're
Hotel.
going toward Cherokee from Silva, it'll be on the left-hand side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we had a really nice, finally got it all fixed up really good. I was bartering for the rent with Entrepreneur Skills Network, and I'm managing their thrift store too, managing both. And we were getting we got a lot of donations. We got a lot of stuff over there. But we weren't paying any rent. Okay, just what ESN took in. And it wasn't enough to cover expenses of the building, even just the utilities. And the owner of the market found someone who could pay big bucks. So just recently, and we usually close in the winter anyways because we're in the one building that's not heated. So we had to move everything down, and it's all scrunched up in one end. I opened last weekend in front of the building, and I made a space just inside one of the doors. She's trying to sell the market. She's trying to find people who can afford to pay. I could be leaving at any time, but she's not going to kick me out overnight. She'll find somewhere for me to stash my stuff, but we may not be able to open much longer. Meanwhile, we have been using, in the summer, we made enough to cover things like my phone, and some gas money. I didn't have a car then. I was having to pay people to take me places.
You have a car now?
I've got a car now. I've got a very dear friend who shall remain nameless so that other people don't ask her for money. And she loaned me $600 towards this car I've got. And that was about 5-6 months ago, and I've been looking for work ever since then. And I got gaps in my employment, and no current references, and so I'm not getting, and it's not like I try to, it's kind of hard to explain when they don't give you a place to explain when you simply put in an application, but I know so much more than I did when I actually worked in the mental health field. I want to go back into counseling in some manner. When I ran the Mental Health Association in New Mexico for a short while, till Andy took my attention away from it and I had to quit doing it. But the police chief was on our board of directors. Now, he has no counseling experience, okay? But he because of politics, he quit the police department and went to work for the domestic violence program as a counselor. So I know you don't have to be licensed. I'm trying to get in that avenue. I've also taught at the community college level. GED prep was the last real job I had. Was when September 11th everybody got laid off. I got hired.
Oh.
Yeah, it worked backwards for me. But it didn't last. It was till everybody went back to work, you know.
Right.
And it was only part-time. But I did do that for a little while. So there's things I can do, but getting somebody to give me that. I'm 65 years old.
Yeah,
You know?
hard.
But I can't live on Social Security. I just cannot live on Social Security.
I don't know anybody can live on just Social Security.
Yeah. And so anyways, that's I guess we're getting down to, I would want to talk about the ACE scores. Can I come back and tell about ACE scores?
You can.
Do a bigger program on ACE scores.
Sure.
ACE scores measure abuse. Okay, that's the main thing. And then you deduct, if you've had a safe place, somebody to talk to, you deduct points for having that safety net, and you get points for trauma and abuse and age and degree. And
So do you want to do that? We'll schedule you to come on again next week at this time. Would that be?
That would be awesome.
I'll check my calendar before when you leave.
Okay.
And we'll confirm that that's a good time, and
That would be
then
awesome.
we'll do it again next week.
Meanwhile, we accept donations. We do not have a 501c3. If you want to give a really big donation and need a tax deduction, I give 10% to Entrepreneur Skills Network and use theirs. That's our agreement. So, and a lot of people do that. A lot of organizations. They, believe it or not, were once the fiscal agent for Clean Slate. And so they thought they were going to be, till Clean Slate took off and is doing great things. And Entrepreneur Skills Network still hasn't.
Okay, so is there a place people? Is there a post
yes.
office box or something where people can send money?
Yes, I've got a blog.
Okay.
It can be sent there through. I have a PayPal link.
PayPal, okay.
I have a PayPal link, and
So what's the
maybe
web
this
page?
one will show. Well, actually,
Yeah, let me zoom in on that.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm looking for speaking engagements. If I have to travel very far, donations are appreciated if I come and speak.
Okay.
Look at them like that way, yeah. And if I have to travel very far, I have got contacts in Eastern Tennessee too. Our latest business cards say representing Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. Because of the fact that we don't have to physically be there, we can be pretty broad as long as I can get there.
Right.
And my blog's a good place to send, and our Facebook page. We have a page on Seascat.org on Facebook.
Okay.
And I've also got a page on Facebook for our thrift store, and it's called WNC Downsizing.
WNCdownsizing.org or?
No, it's just Facebook.
Oh,
Facebook
Facebook.
page.
Okay. WNC
Downsizing.
Downsizing. Okay.
Yeah. And our high-end things that come into the thrift store those are the things I post on the on WNC Downsizing.
Okay.
And we're always looking for donations.
And is there a post office box that people can send a check to, and who would they send it to?
Well, if they don't have to have a tax write-off, and they can take my word for it
Right.
that it'll be spent on business expenses, they can send it to me.
Okay.
Care of the Starlight Motel, 8682 US 74 West, Whittier, North Carolina, 28789.
Good. And
And,
care to and make the check out to Connie Jean Conklin.
Yes. Or Connie J. Conklin. Yeah.
Connie J. Conklin.
Yeah, and it'll go to business expenses. I did a cost thing for when I applied for Section 8, which I ended up not using because there's nothing to rent out there that low. But anyways, I had to prove to the office that I was not making money off of Seascat, and I've got the numbers now of what we take in and what can be counted as business expenses. I don't
well, if you were getting a salary, that would certainly be legitimate. You know.
I need a computer. We don't have an office of any kind.
So maybe
right
somebody out there will donate a computer to you.
Well, we actually even are going to be needing a physical location, because the thrift store is going. I mean, we're going to have to move. And if we don't move the thrift store, I want to at least be able to have our lending we have that's what else that we have. We have a lending library, and then this, it's part of our educational program. People can come and borrow books. They just have to, tell me they're going to bring them back.
This is at Eastgate.
Well, they're right at Westgate.
Is it Eastgate or Westgate?
It's you're coming to Gateway. It's not East or West. That's
it's Gateway. Okay.
Gateway Market. We've got a lending library. A lot of those things are in boxes and not on the shelf at the moment, but they're there. And if somebody needs anything in particular, I can find the box and get it pulled down. I made a point of finding them just the past few days. So, because as long as that space is still available to me, I'm going to continue to organize it. I'm going to move shelves back and open up more space and put more things from the back on the shelves. Okay. But right now they're just kind of all piled in the back, most of the stuff. And but we will eventually be needing a location, at least for our lending library, so it's available to the community. Oh, and I had an actual donation box at City Lights. But somebody lost it.
Oh.
But there was nothing in it they didn't think. So I've got my flyers up over there, and they've got books that we need. They've got a list of our books. It's a sheet, it's a thing like this that they've got at City Lights, and if I can, I'll get it put to other places. These are books we want to have in our lending library. Some we have, some we could use more than one copy of. It's these are just this was copied off of a post from another group, but there's also a list in here of we have any 12-step book. Any 12-step books we accept. Okay. And there's always room for. My favorite author is Pia Melody. Her workbook, Breaking Free, has been written in, and it really is a good idea to share it because other people can read what you've written. No, so we need clean copies of that and a general guide through the 12 steps, because it's been written in by more than one person. So we need clean copies of those, and then we'll hand out notebooks with them for the next people. So. Well,
okay. Thank you so much, Connie Jean Conklin, for coming on, and we'll see you again next week.
Okay. Sounds good.
If we'll try to do it next Wednesday, I'll look at my calendar, and if that works out, we'll do it next week at the same time. If not, we'll do it sometime within a few days of that. Yeah.
All right. Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks.